Hey, welcome back to an update on the Block Styles Manager. So today I'm going to do a quick demo of what's been worked on and some work in progress stuff. And then mostly I'm going to talk about some questions I got about CSS, if this is a good idea, if loading so much CSS is a good idea, how WordPress handles CSS, that sort of stuff. So first, quick UI update. I'm trying to solve the problem of, let's go down here. When you add a bunch of styles to a block, you also want, like, this UI where you can add them was pretty handy, but it didn't let you jump into editing them very well. So like you could add a style, but then what if you wanted to edit that style directly from the block? So I'm going to end up breaking this all apart. But the idea is if a block style is applied, it would show up here as like a button and you could click and it would take you directly into editing that style. Similarly, if you create a new style, this now works. It makes sure it doesn't like conflict or anything like that. And when you make a new style, it's going to jump you straight into like the editing of that style, which meant that this thing here, which is like technically completely unrelated code to this inspector controls, they needed to have like a sort of global state that they share. So I kind of had to build that into the custom data store that I built. Like I needed to be able to say, hey, if I select here, that's the thing that I'm editing when you load this other panel here. So it works. I don't know if I did it the best way, but it's getting pretty close and I'm pretty excited about that. But now let's just talk a bit about CSS. So one of the questions I got was, isn't it really bad for performance to load like a whole bunch of CSS files? Because the way that we're storing this is as flat CSS files, literally in a folder in your theme or in the WP content folder where you're kind of allowed to put stuff in WordPress, you know, like uploads, put stuff there, backup plugins, put things there, that sort of stuff. So what's going to happen on the front of my site, I'm going to load like 100 of these little tiny CSS files for every single block style that I want. That's not super sustainable, but what's the alternative where you say, oh, I want one giant CSS file with literally everything, right? And even whether I'm using it on that page or not. So that's kind of the big conflict. And that's where tools like Tailwind come in, where they say like, write your CSS, you know, use a bunch of our utility classes, and we will do some processing at the before renders where we'll decide, hey, this is the stuff that's actually being used in your files, this is stuff that's not, and we'll only spit that out. And it's really hard to do that with WordPress because WordPress, you know, you can edit content in the database, you can kind of like mix and match. There might be stuff in your theme. Like it's really hard for it to solve that problem of saying only load the styles that I'm actually using. But overall, WordPress is pretty good about this. So this is the front end of our site. Here's our group block, and you can see it has a few extra styles that we wrote, that new block style 1, new block style 3. Those were just some of those files that we were just looking at here. Those are, you know, added as classes. So where is the CSS for those? So the CSS is actually being loaded the same way WordPress loads all of the other CSS. And this is by default. It could be different on different setups, but it's all up in the head of your document. Sometimes it'll space it out in line, but what it's actually going to do is it's going to take all that CSS, and the WordPress style engine actually is going to inline it. So here's the WP block group. If I expand that, here's the styles that we just wrote. Those are the custom block styles, and they're actually getting added to WordPress's core group block styles. We're doing this so that way, however the styles are handled, WordPress core is handling them. It's not loading all those separate CSS files. It's actually at the moment of render going to grab that CSS file and inject it in line. So you're not going to see like 50 network requests for a bunch of other files. So this is how the WordPress style engine works. And theoretically, the way it should work is that if a block is not on a page, there should be no styles for that block. You should only see styles if a block is being used on a page. Then there's the block styles that we've registered extra on top of like core WordPress styles. And what I wanted to say was, if I'm not using that class on the page, don't render it at all. So that's the part that I'm building out extra, but I'm still using this core WordPress function of basically I'll give you a CSS file or some inline styles, whatever, and you're going to just feed it into that same engine and handle all of the rendering. And so any sort of optimization plugin you use that's, you know, plays nice with the WordPress styles engine will be super helpful, all that sort of stuff. So this is where the CSS ends up. And I guess let's take a quick look at how I'm doing it and what I like about how I'm doing it, what I don't like about. So what I have here is a function that's handling getting these block styles. So let me walk through it and then we can talk about the pros and cons and why I'm not 100% sure that I'm sold on this. So we're hooking into the render block function. So as WordPress generates the page and it renders each of the blocks, you get to hook in and do some stuff while it's working out the kind of logic of that block. We have a custom attribute that's saving all of our block styles. So we're not using the core block styles that you would normally use. We're saving it in a custom attribute. And so that way we have a little more control over how the data is saved. And if you turn off my plugin, it doesn't break anything. So when the block renders, if it has any block styles, it's just going to query them. This is just kind of like a little function to get the information about them. So we're going to grab each of those block styles and we're going to grab them. And then if they exist, if we get through them, what we're going to do is we're going to register those block styles using that core register block style function. So that's what's interesting is if I run register block style across the entire site, it's pretty much always going to load that CSS. Like whether I'm using that class or not, it's going to load that CSS. But I can hook in and use this function when I know for sure, because I'm checking the attribute that I want that block style, and I can call it here as the block is rendering, and then it still works. It was pretty great. It's weird because I couldn't actually, I tried some of the other like enqueue block style asset type functions and stuff, and some of them it was like too late in the WordPress like hook order to do it. But for some reason I can actually do this with register block style. So I am using register block style to enqueue them. And I'm relying on the fact that if I use it, it's going to enqueue it no matter what, even though I'm sort of like filtering ahead of time. So if you can tell, there's probably one major downside to this, which is if multiple blocks use the same style, it's going to call this function multiple times for that same file. It doesn't actually cause any issues, but it just feels bad. It feels like I should, keep track of all the styles first. And when I have all of them, shake out all the extra duplicates and then call register block style. So I'm not calling the same function with literally the exact same data multiple times. So that's the last kind of like performance concern that I have, because I do want this to be a little more performant. I also don't know what will happen if like I have 500 custom styles. Is that too much? Will that get too slow? These are all things to consider. But again, I was really hoping that the WordPress styles engine would handle this. There is a GitHub issue talking about this kind of like tree shaking that needs to happen for CSS, and it just isn't happening yet. So it doesn't seem to be a priority. So that's why I'm kind of messing around with these ideas to see what's going to work best. So next steps, I'm going to finish up some of the UI stuff, get it in at least a good enough state that I can get some feedback. And then I also want to see if I can figure out a way to not call this function more than once for a specific block style, which basically means maybe some sort of cache or something like that, where I keep track of the block styles that have already been registered. So that's where we're going. That's where we're going next. I hope this cleared up some issues about CSS, and what I hope is trying to get as performant as possible within the parameters of the block editor. And let me know if you have any questions, and see you next time.